Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Please Hustle Responsibly podcast. I'm Christina Veltri here with Christina Magro and Matt Cole. Today we will be discussing compassion and empathy with Kimiko. But first, I'm going to do a little self-care check-in with my co-hosts. Christina, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Today it's one of those beautiful snowy days in Chicago, like the big picturesque snowflakes. And I don't know how you guys feel about snow, but I really like snow and it puts me in a beautiful mood. And as you all probably know, I have a puppy, so he's experiencing snow for the first time and it's hilarious. So today's a great day. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm good. I was going to comment on the snow too. It's really nice. It was a nice little thing to wake up to. But yeah, I'm good. Had a pretty chill work week and got to have dinner with a very good friend last night. Outside, in safe spaces, obviously, but it was really nice to get to hang out with someone that I haven't seen in a while. How you doing, Belgi?
I'm good. I am in the same place. I think we're all in the holiday spirit. I woke up this morning, saw it was snowing, and immediately was like, gotta get outside. So feeling pretty good about that. Kimiko, how are you?
I'm great. I sometimes have a kind of negative reaction to snow, but I did not have that this morning. It was beautiful. I too went out and appreciated how beautiful it was. I feel like there's a sweet spot for for snow. This is kind of the perfect amount for me. I like it when it comes, and I like it when it goes.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'm great. I'm in great spirits. Really nice to be here.
Wonderful. We are really excited to have you here. I wanted to give a little background on how I met Kimiko. We just met this past summer through a mutual friend of ours, and I just immediately knew that there was something about her that I wanted to know more. She discussed going to school, but I didn't really get a chance to ask like right away what she was going to school for. I just acted like I knew. And then at the end of it, I asked, and she told me about the Compassion Institute, and I knew why I was drawn to her. And one of the first things that you gave me is this card that says, I wish you happiness. I keep it on my fridge. I think of it often, and I just love that very simple calling card. So I'd love for you to give us a little background about you, your connection with hospitality, and your mindset on happiness.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I take this as like a huge responsibility. Oh, we have K-Mug.
I love it. Cheers.
It's a Christmas gift. This is a huge responsibility for me, to talk about compassion. I've been studying for, like in class since September, since the end of August. So I, please will ask for your patience if I pause or if I say, I don't feel like I should answer that question because I won't do it justice. That being said, I grew up in a family with a father who absolutely loved eating out, still loves eating out, loved going to restaurants. And I was probably 8 or 9 when they decided they were going to do this like experimenting with new cuisines, like once or twice a month. And I was the one who had to go with. My sister was a little bit older and didn't have to. And so like we'd go and we'd try all these different foods. And my dad's like, "Do you want a mint shake?" I was like, "Yeah, I want a mint shake." And it was salty. And I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And it made me I decided I wanted to be like a reviewer. I wanted to be a restaurant reviewer for kids. In restaurants where they didn't cater to children. So I was like, I want to write reviews for Chicago Magazine, and I want to, all the restaurants that we go to, I want to tell them what kids can order that they would like. And that kind of started me off on my love of restaurants, which I never did become a food writer, which is fine. But I really loved restaurants, and through, I think I would say through that first love, and then just kind of some pretty, bad relationships as a child, like where I, mistreatment, just the standard stuff where you just don't get the love that you need, or you don't get the affection or kindness that you need as a child to kind of set good patterns. When I first started working in restaurants at 15, I felt understood, and I felt like that was a good place for me to be. Sort of a misfit environment, particularly I would say in the 80s. The hospitality industry has grown up so much and matured so much that the behaviors that you saw and the way that we lived back then was certainly a lot more reckless, and a great home for broken souls. So I fell into a really awesome / destructive lifestyle that has become a pattern of, it kind of grew into my bones and grew into who I was for a really long time, even after I left. Just, creating habits that aren't good for you can often be really well supported in that environment. And it's taken me years to kind of recognize that and start to address it. And that's how I kind of came into, changing lifestyles, etc. Wow, that was really long-winded. I wonder what that sounded like.
No, I think that's great.
Seriously, that was awesome.
And it sounds like not much has changed from the 80s within our industry.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's definitely a little bit more accountability and more political correctness around, or at least there's beginning to be that.
Yeah.
But I think that the people that are attracted to the industry are still, misfits and broken people that are looking for that connection and family, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I very much still consider people who I worked with in the 90s to be very important in my life and family. Mm-hmm. Definitely. They were my people. Mm-hmm. And, my husband works still in hospitality and has been for, I guess, close to 30 years. So I'm still very much attached to, I stopped working in hospitality proper about, I guess, 15 years ago. And then I DJ'd for a while. I did a lot of like speed rack events, and I worked at like bars and restaurants in New York and kind of all over the world, just because of my relationship with my husband. He was able to kind of like get me gigs. That's totally, that's not, I got my own gigs, but he did help. So I've stayed really close with hospitality, and in the last, every year someone commits suicide or overdoses. And in my marriage and in our relationships, we lose someone pretty much every year, if not more frequently. And I know you guys suffered a pretty big loss last year, someone in the industry, but I don't think it was suicide. I think it was maybe cancer, but I know, we take our people really, they're family.
Yeah. So the inception of support staff was a suicide completion by a very close friend of our founders. So we definitely take mental health, mental illness, and, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that this is our mission to, I don't want to say save lives, but like give let people know that they're not alone and hopefully make an impact that could save a life.
Well, I mean, why not go big? You know, I mean, with humility, you know, why not say that, yeah, if we can save one life, I mean, that's not an arrogant statement. I think that we should want that as a general, you know, in life. If I can save a life, I would be very happy to do so, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we found ourselves just feeling a little bit lost and like searching for resources or like trying to help ourselves, but like not really knowing how. And then also not being able to realistically afford like the services that we all desperately needed. And I think that's like the main desire of what we started to do is like, I was looking around at all of my friends drinking and like not really knowing how to deal with this intense grief and also this extremely traumatic situation, and we were all kind of leaning on each other for support, but also like our cups are all empty and we have nothing left to give, so we're just sloppily supporting each other with alcohol and other things because that's the only way that we knew how to cope in that moment and frankly could afford to cope in that moment. So I'm super proud of what we've accomplished so far, and I'm excited to see what we can accomplish in the future for sure. And I think it all starts with a little bit of empathy and compassion towards one another, especially during these times.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I strongly suspect that the reason I know the reason I was initially drawn to restaurants was a healthy reason, love, but I suspect the reason that I stayed with it was because I was too poor to get services, and medicating is much easier to do when you work in hospitality.
Very easy and very accessible.
Yeah, and very dangerous.
I'm going to shift just a little bit, and I'm curious how you were introduced to the Compassion Institute and what drew you there.
Sure. On a much grander scale, I realized my purpose this past year is kind of towards bringing happiness into all of my encounters, or trying to. I mean, that's lofty, but again, like trying to save a life, might as well go big, and I had like a really bad spiral out of control situation in 2017. I stopped drinking for 6 months. I started working out every single day. I just found a couple of tools to like kind of at least elevate me enough to where I could start to question whether or not I could be a happier person, because I was miserable. And that took me a couple of years to kind of just get stabilized. I stopped taking antidepressants because they were having I was on them for like 30 years. So it was a point where I was like, what's this shit doing for me anymore? I felt really flat. And that was scary and hard, and I don't recommend it for everyone. So certainly not saying don't take antidepressants, but I needed to establish a baseline. And so I stopped, and the working out every day kind of supported that, which there's science behind. And after a couple of years, I felt like, all right, well, what do I want to do now? And how can I move forward? Because I'm still not very happy, but at least I'm sort of stable. And I had one of my best friends was like, you should start meditating. And I was like, blah, blah, blah. And then, I'm sorry, excuse me, damn likely. All right. I'll say no to that. I was like, yeah, whatever. And she said, well, how about, read the Book of Joy? And I was like, all right, I'll read the Book of Joy. And it's His Holiness Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And I read it, and I was like, and I've always really loved the idea of Buddhism, and I'd read a lot of Buddhist books when I was in my 20s, and just kind of rejected it because I didn't want to be I wasn't ready to take care of myself. And it was like, oh, this is saying that I need to be balanced. I was I'm doing that. But so I read the book and I really loved it. And there was a part in the book where they discuss a book called The Fearless Heart by tangentially. And it's all about compassion. And I believe in the book, they also talk about the Compassion Institute. And I was like, oh, this, sounds like maybe a good path for me, because I had looked at going back to school, sort of back to, I had kind of looked at that, and all of the universities were kind of like, they didn't have, I know what I want. I want to help people. I want to help people be happier. But I was like, I'm not fucking taking geology. Like, that's never going to happen, So anyway, Compassion Institute through Stanford University. Wow, that sounds legit. I'll check it out. And I, I read The Fearless Heart, and then I looked into Compassion Institute, and I, enrolled into the program, and it just really aligned. I mean, I had already had those cards that I gave you printed up, and I was like, well, this just all seems, like I really just want people to be happy. I want me to be happy. Nobody seems to be happy right now. And this is even before the pandemic. I'm like, what can I do to support that, and maybe, start trying to figure out what it means to get a little bit happier. So that's how I came to the Institute, and I ended up taking the 8-week program last year in January. And the founding faculty, and most of the faculty are like PhDs. There's a neuroscientist. There's a professor who was one of the first students of MSBR, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction. She's worked with John Kabat-Zinn for 30 plus years. Like, these are like the heavyweights. I was like, I'm totally in awe of the faculty of this program. So I, was like, I'm gonna try and enroll to become a teacher, and was like, there's no way they're gonna accept me. But they did, which is nice. So now I'm kind of getting through. I have an intensive next weekend, and then I start teaching the practicum in February or March. So does that answer?
That's amazing. Yeah.
I want to comment on something you were saying. You were saying that you weren't ready to take care of yourself, and I think that's such an important thing to recognize when you're taking steps forward and trying to do things, like whether you're actually committed to yourself and the things that you're trying to do, really makes the ease of doing those so much more real. Because if you're not ready to take those steps, then you're just you're on a treadmill. You're just moving in place. And I don't think enough people really talk about the fact that you need to be ready to do that for yourself. You need to be able to do things for yourself in general.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I also think that it's really important to recognize that making a commitment to taking care of yourself can be a really, really small thing. It can, I am realizing that I spent many years saying, you always fuck this up. You never do this right. I'm never drinking again. I'll never send another text message to that person. I'll never call that person. All of these always and nevers, and then there's failure that comes right after that. So I think it's really important to recognize that making a commitment to taking care of yourself can actually come in really small increments. It's, for our purposes, it's like drinking one less day of the week, or drinking one less shot, or, taking 2 minutes to walk around the block before you go to the bar because you're really angry, because someone said something shitty to you, and having a shot. It's like, I'm going to take 2 minutes before I have the normal response of doing this thing that's probably not so healthy. It's just the pause, that it's like the first thing that you can do to say, all right, I'm going to do something to try and take care of myself.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had so much failure in the I want to take care of myself department,
when I think coupled with like people's such like have such a reaction to like those around them and want to compare themselves to those around them, and then you like add that to that, and you're just digging like a very deep hole. And you're like, well, they're doing this and I'm not doing this, and it's like if you could stop comparing yourself to other people and realize that everyone's growing at their own pace and doing things in their own time in their own way, like they've probably got tons of fucked up shit too, and they're just making a step in a positive direction for them, even if it is just like 1 inch at a time.
Well, that you just said a couple of things there about self-compassion and about common humanity in general. So this particular program is an 8-week program. And it's basically like starting a fitness program, like you go in, you're going to like, you go to the gym, you're like, I'm going to do 15 minutes, and that for me is how I started working out again. I was like, I'm going to do 100 days of 10 minutes a day. And that's how I'm going to start. And now it's been almost 3 years that I've worked out every day. So like you start with something small. And with this program in compassion, you start with settling the mind. The first week is you settle the mind, and you're learning about the practice of like just sitting and settling the mind. And it evolves over the 8 weeks, but 2 weeks are spent on self-compassion and loving kindness to yourself, which is where you say, okay, sometimes I make mistakes, but I'm going to give myself the love I need, and be kind to myself. And yes, other people might be doing it this way. I'm going to do it myself this way. And I'm going to give myself the care and attention that I need in order to do the things that are going to make me better or healthier or happier. And then the common humanity aspect, which comes in around five weeks, it's that other people in the same way that they might be doing things in a way that you perceive as being better, it's different, or they're struggling as well. We don't know about other people's internal struggles, and just like them, we want to be happy, and we owe that to ourselves, and we just don't know what other people's struggles are, So recognizing that, we all suffer kind of can help you feel better about your situation. Yeah, maybe that person, lost 40 pounds or, got a promotion or whatever it is, but there's something going on within them that they're struggling with as well. We're all struggling.
So I don't want to make any assumptions, but based on what you've told me, how did you adapt to focusing on self-compassion, like before focusing on others' well-being? It seems like it would be a challenge.
So the last few weeks, it's gotten a lot. Listen, the last few weeks, it's gotten a little easier. I mean, shit. Like if that says anything to you about how hard the idea of self-compassion is, like I'm paying attention at such a micro level. I'm like, so before I started the program, I took the class, and the self-compassion part was really great. I loved it. I was like, oh, this is like a treat for me, and I can use this. But I didn't really have any challenges. It was January and February of last year, before the shutdown. My life was pretty good. I'd just been in Brazil. I felt pretty great about life in general. And I was like, self-compassion, I love this. It's a great tool. I'm going to use it. And then the shutdown happened. Everything happened. I lost all my income. All of these things came together. And, I feel really fortunate that I didn't completely spiral out of control at that particular time. So I was like, I'm going to enroll in this program. I'm going to learn how to teach compassion. And I did that. And I also enrolled in another program about workplace burnout. And I started both of them in September. And I came here to Chicago from Paris, which I usually live in Paris. And I have a very stable kind of existence there. And I was like, I'm going to come back to Chicago, and I'm going to live with my brother on this couch. And I'm going to help him with his kids. And I'm going to do these 2 programs. And I'm going to, keep drinking, a couple times, if not every day of the week. And, but I'll be in a compassion program, so it'll be great, and holy shit, like I spiraled like so hard. I was like, why can't I give myself compassion? Why do I keep fucking up? Why can't I give myself compassion? Why do I keep fucking up? And it was like 2 of the most intense and painful months. So, that's full disclosure of giving yourself compassion is not an easy thing. It's a practice, and that's why you start the second week is loving kindness towards a loved one. And the examples we give when we teach it is, if you can't, like, don't use like don't use someone who can, you know, don't use a big one. Like, yeah, you should use your mom or you should use your dad, but that's probably not a great idea. You know, use your puppy, you know, I have a friend who uses Dumbledore, you know, like she has a really hard time finding anyone in her life who represents something stable and loving that she can, you know, send compassion and loving kindness to for practice. You know, so the second week, that's what you do. You find someone who's really easy for you to want to feel good about, and you want to like help if they're suffering. You want to help if, you know, you want to send love to. And then 3 and 4 is compassion and loving kindness for yourself. And you like, you know, the practice is great, you know, and you begin to recognize the value and why you do these things, but it's not always going to work, and it's practice, you know, and then you have to say to yourself, okay, well, all right, I feel bad. It's okay that I feel bad, you know, and what do I need right now to like feel better? And I'm really realizing that some of it's quite physical. You know, there are practices that we do where you actually evoke love, like you have a memory of something, of a time when you felt great love, and you evoke anger, and you have a memory of what it feels like when you have anger. And I've been playing around with the idea of evoking love towards someone else and then imagining what it feels like if I applied that to myself. It's not easy. It's really not. And it's a lot to ask yourself to say, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to practice this. You know, I think that we're hard in general on ourselves, are like just as human beings, as comparing minds. And then within this industry, you know, it's a struggle to survive. You know, like there's a lot of autopilot, and, you know, I'll think about that later, and I'll drink it away, you know. So that's a long-winded response to a short question, I think. So.
That's perfect. It actually leads into another question that I have about, you know, being in a fast-paced environment such as a restaurant. What are some practices that we could utilize to have compassion rather than having that initial reaction of freaking out or lashing out at another person?
Well, and that kind of goes back to the comparing and common humanity like aspect of things. If you can take a moment to pause and realize that we're all struggling, you know, when someone's in front of you who is setting you off, you can take that moment to say, this person's struggling as well. You know, how can I take this moment to respond rather than react? You know, and to know that even though on the surface we seem like very different people, particularly right now, we're all really struggling. Mm-hmm. You know, and I know that that's a huge ask and challenge, knowing what I read in the media about how confrontational people have been because they're so scared. But it feels good to give people that space. And for me, that's the biggest upside to taking that moment and trying to like recognize that this person's coming from a like clearly a very like dysregulated place, and I have the opportunity to like practice compassion here because I have, you know, I've thought about it, and I that's the human I want to be. But I also have some like smaller, like for me at one point I just started saying to myself, all right, they're doing a thing, you know, and it's not personal. You know, whatever, like in the car when I want to lose my shit because someone does something, I'm like, all right, they're doing a thing and it clearly has nothing to do with me, you know, so I'm not going to make this personal, you know, and I use the doing a thing a lot, you know, and I know it's hard. It's a lot harder when you're in that immediate moment with a customer who has clearly lost their shit. But it's also, you know, like I feel strongly like, wow, I feel for you. You must really not be well, you know, and without pity, because like that sucks, you know, but just like a genuine feeling of you must really be coming from a bad place. And yeah, I am too, but I can take this moment, you know, and see that you're suffering and ask, how can I help? And not necessarily out loud, but how can I help is a thought that you can have, or what's the compassionate thing to do in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer that a little
Yeah,
bit?
I think that also touches on like how to train to have like a subconscious response of compassion, and really it's just taking that moment
Which
rather.
doesn't come easily. That's practice.
Yeah.
But when you have the opportunity, when you have something in front of you, like when I took that class and I was like, oh, self-compassion, I'm going to use this as a tool. And it was like all like rainbows and butterflies because my life was in a really good place. And then putting it into practice when my life was a dumpster fire, it was like, it's harder. It's harder to do that, but you
I
got to.
also think that there's an importance to practicing something when things are easy rather than only
That's how you do it.
Yeah, like specifically in restaurants, it's like when there's downtime and it's slow, don't lose the basics to how you should be operating when things are busy. Otherwise, when it gets busy, you're like, oh fuck, and then everything falls apart. But if you just like maintain that practice, even when you don't have to, you can apply it when there's not the time to apply it.
Right. I mean, you just said it right there. I mean, that is it. You practice when things are easier so that when they aren't, you have those skills.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember I was talking to my therapist in Paris a couple of years ago, and I was like, do you meditate? And she was like, oh yeah, I meditate every day. And I was like, do your kids meditate? And she's like, no, they don't need it. And I'm like, that's why they meditate now, because when they do need it, it'll be right there for them.
Yeah.
I think it's so funny how we don't think about that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to do the things now when it's a little bit easier, so that when it's hard, it's easier,
I love that you just brought that up, because I just had this conversation with my sister, because her son is 6. So he's, growing and going through some stuff, having a hard time concentrating. He's a 6-year-old and she's having a hard time dealing with it. And I was like, why don't you try to do a guided family meditation? What will probably happen is your kids will fall asleep, but at least it's like eventually they'll be able to stay awake for a little bit longer, concentrate for a little bit longer, and then apply these practices when they get older, before they feel like, I don't know how to handle being anxious or just distracted. Yeah.
What was her response to that?
She said, she was like, that's a great idea. I never thought about that. And I was like,
that's awesome.
I mean, you have a lot of things to think about. I am just speaking from the outside, so it's easy for me to speculate on what you should do. But yeah.
I mean, it's awesome advice. I mean, my niece has some trauma, and she does mindful powers a lot of days. And when I'm here, she does them most days. She's really young, but she had some experiences when she was little, and you can see it, pretty. You can see it.
Yeah.
And now she'll ask, can I do mindful powers? And I'm like, no. Which is awesome. I just read that I'm reading a book on talking like compassion, but we just don't invest in exploring how our minds work, so we don't really have the tools, particularly in Western culture. We don't invest at all in helping children, and then now as adults, there's no investment has been made into understanding why our minds are the way they are, and understanding that we don't have to entertain every thought that comes into our head, and understanding that, like how to like stop ruminating, all of those things, which does not part and parcel of the compassion conversation, but it is true, like we find ourselves completely like, on a ledge or spiraling out of control, and we don't know how to manage our minds, which is scary.
What do you think about the mentality of, it was hard for me, so I mean, I I want to disclose that I am against this mentality, but I think that it's very common. Like, it was hard for me, so it should be hard for other people.
Yeah.
And I think that is not only from businesses, like obviously the chef, but also parents with children, like parents who didn't have the practices that are available now and don't think about giving their children those practices because, like, I don't know if they want to toughen them up or what have you, but.
Well, obviously I don't agree with that mentality. You know, it's not healthy, you know. And I think if you investigate that, the person or the company or the businesses that have those mentalities, you don't find, you know, you're not going to raise a healthy child, one who, you know, can support themselves when they fail, you know. But in business, you lose good employees when you have that mentality. It's just not financially smart to approach your staff in that way. Well, this is the way it's always been done, so this is the way we do it. I'd like to think about that a little bit more because it's prevalent. You know, like, it was hard for me, it should be hard. These kids today, they don't, you know, they don't know how good they have it. You know, I think, you know, that was a pretty strong mentality up through like the 50s and 60s and 70s. And then there was a turnaround that was to extra self-esteem, you know, and all kids are, everything you do is great. Everyone gets a prize, you know, no teams win. You know, like, we're all number one. So I feel like on the one side, there's the buck up, and on the other side, there's the everyone's a winner. And on both sides, you're not giving people coping skills. You know, you can't win all of the time. And then what do you do when you lose, you know? And you're looking around like, but that's not how I was taught, you know? And when you try and force someone to always succeed or, you know, to buck up, well, then it's not happy, you know? It's not making happy people, and the expectations are too high. And, you know, I know that college students right now are really struggling. There's that program through Yale, the Science of Wellbeing, and it came into existence because the messaging was, you have to have the best job, you need to plan for, you know, to make a lot of money, you want to have a nice house, great career, you know, and there's no happiness in that. There's no health in that. And yeah, I mean, that's not a really solid answer to that question, but
okay. I thought of it when we were talking about, you know, children, and it was a rogue question.
I mean, yeah, but it is super common in restaurants. You know, it's. I mean, I've worked with chefs and been around chefs that are like, you know, if you don't work 60 hours a week, 20 off the clock because you're coming in to get your things done and do this, and you're not really doing it. And it's like, well, actually, then you're just working with people who are taking advantage of you and taking advantage of your time, and who aren't actually fully invested in your growth. You know, which is a lot of people, because it is a super fast-paced environment and there's so much going on. And it's like, you know, I think it kind of harkens back to Christina's question of like, how do you train yourself to do these things when it's busy? Because when it's busy, it's easier to just, you know, lash out or just kind of walk away or just be not in it. And so you expect everyone to do the things that you did, when what we should really be reaching for is growth and, you know, continuous advancement. And like, yeah, like, I did these things and they sucked, so why would I want anyone else to do them? You know, if we want them to be happy, we want them to grow, we want them to be nurtured and supported and fulfilled, and not like miserable fucking people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that you hit the nail on the head there. How'd that work out for you? You know,
I'm here now.
No, I mean, the question is like when people say, well, that's not how, when I had to do this, this is how we did it. And it was, it was really hard. So why shouldn't it be hard for you? And it's like, well, did that work for you? Was that good? Are you happy?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. I mean, like I spent a lot of time finding work environments that weren't like that, and moved away from those places. And like, cause it just wasn't my style. I was like, I don't want to come in here and work for free and be sad and miserable and work with these people who are also sad and miserable. Like, I'd rather surround myself like these two and be happy and, and feel good about myself and, like enjoy my time. And that's what I look for now in work environments and people that I work with. It's like, can we be positive together? Can we grow together? Or like, is this just going to be a continuous grind? Because if it is, then it's not for me.
Yeah, great.
So is there part of the Compassion Institute that focuses on compassion being applied to business plans and the return of investment, that having compassion as part of your business? Or,
well,
I know that we've talked a little bit about like, how compassion is clearly going to lead to happier people, more longevity. But I was curious if there were any studies.
There are a lot of studies that talk about what happens when you bring mindfulness or compassion into the workplace. I'm looking for this article. I think for every dollar you spend on, and this isn't well-being, this is actually more focused on mindfulness and compassion. For every dollar you spend, you get $2.33 back. There are a lot of studies that support what happens to businesses when you invest in mindfulness practices. And in the last 20 years, they've really increased those studies, and can come back with some really great scientific data on what happens for companies when they invest in that. I kind of have been thinking a lot about that question, because I'm certain that no studies have been done within hospitality, and the mindset. Really, people who own restaurants come into it for a lot of different reasons, and very rarely are they thinking about the growth of their employees or the happiness of their employees. I would say that's definitely a newer thing that I see a lot more now than I ever did before. But I haven't really seen a lot of places really committed to healthy practices within their companies for hospitality.
This is obviously like, you don't have to have the perfect answer for this because it's really just a conversation, but why do you think it is that in hospitality specifically, which is a person-focused business, that's not of course the guest is always part of the plan and their happiness and their return is part of the plan, but why is that same thought not extended to the employees who are part of the reason why the business is there, why the guests return, why the guests have a good experience?
Well, I have a few thoughts about that, but why do you guys think that's the case?
I think because of the stigma of just being in the restaurant industry in general, and I'm not trying to like put all owners in a box, but the majority of owners, I feel like, view folks as replaceable and kind of, they don't value the employee and their presence and how much they can actually impact the business and how they do bring people back, especially like I come from the bar side mainly, and like if you can gain a regular clientele, not only are you guaranteeing yourself revenue, consistent revenue, but you're also helping the business out as well. And I think, and speaking from personal experience, the owners that I've worked for are lacking empathy because they haven't been in this situation ever, or they were a bartender, a door guy, et cetera, 25 years ago, and have kind of forgotten what it's like to be on that side of things.
And they see access to dollar signs and they're like, yeah, we'll just put our money into this. We'll hire someone to run this program. We'll come in and be like, why aren't we making more money? You need to change these things. And it's like, yeah, dude, you're not here day to day. You don't know why these things function the way that they do. And now you're like passing down these things. And so then you're putting stress on your management team without the proper support from you. And I think it just ends up with a lot of unneeded stress, extra stress on people's plates.
I think that a lot of the businesses that put up the front that they are, you know, focused on their employees, like, this is a family, we want to extend hospitality one another, that's a way to soothe their own feelings and like make them feel better without actually understanding that then on the flip side of things, they're always putting the guest, which means the money first. And really that catchphrase of like, we're family, we extend hospitality to one another, like, we're here for you, is meaningless because there's no action behind it. If that was the case, like, the guest would always be second, if not later in the priorities, because, you know, if you're treating your employees well and they feel happy to be there, the guests take care of themselves, or like the business takes care of the guest in its own. But the problem comes from the top when people don't feel supported, and then everything just falls apart.
And the problem comes with the verbiage of family. I feel like that's a tool of manipulation. Like, I'm trying to get paid here. This is my job. Like, I did not ask for this, you know?
Yeah,
like,
if we're family.
Like, I view you as like my drunk, weird uncle. Like, I'm going to deal with you because I have to, but like, I'm getting
out of here.
Yeah, like I this is a job that's supposed to pay my bills. Like, I don't want to be your family, you know? I just want to like be in a safe work environment, be treated with respect, you know? Like, you can check the family stuff at the door. I don't give a shit about that. I would rather genuinely be treated well than be treated performatively well.
Yeah, like, if we're family, why do I have to debase myself to explain what value I bring to your restaurant for a raise?
Oh.
Like, you know, like, and like you were saying, Mags, like, I would rather work in an environment where, you know, someone who like is coming up and saying hello and checking in on me, like says goodbye, says, like, asks and is involved in like things that are going on in my life. Like, hey, you said you were doing this week. How'd that go? Like, that little bit goes so much further than an extra couple bucks an hour. Sometimes, but you know, it's nice to have someone who like, we work with people that genuinely care about you, rather than just like, hey, we're family, what's up, how you doing?
Hey, we're family, and you're like, my mom would never treat me this way.
Yeah.
My mom would pay me $500 an hour because I deserve it. You know,
because I'm her special boy.
Well, so I know that we have talked about this in previous episodes about just how wrong the use of family is, but I think that that's the only verbiage that people use to like show that they are for their staff, even though, like you said, it is a performative
action. Word too. So it's like I feel like that's such dangerous water, murky water to
Mhm.
put yourself in.
Absolutely.
Like family, so many people in hospitality are not tight with their family is their chosen family.
Right.
Now I've left a family of like relationship, like birth, blood. I've found this new family, and now I'm with these people who are trying to call me family, and it doesn't feel good.
Mm-hmm. So what do we think collectively the real words should be for showing that you are compassionate for your staff?
I mean, I honestly, this comes down to actually having an authentic approach and really understanding what treating your employees with authenticity, giving them some autonomy, being transparent,
Mm-hmm.
giving them a space to talk about what they need. I mean, you can call it whatever the fuck you want. If you call it a family and it's a healthy family, well, then that's great. But throwing any word on top of it's not going to mean anything unless you actually have the practices that go along with it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's funny. This is just a really small example, but I was thinking about this morning because, like, what would it look like to show that to your staff? To like make them feel like they have some sense of autonomy. And I thought about it for a while. And there's this constant. My staff they all steal from me, so I can't give them any trust because they'll steal from me. And I remember working for Brother Jimmy's here in the 90s, and we had a very liberal comping policy. Like really, very rarely would the owners come and say, that was aggressive, you guys need to rein it back in. And you could comp, but if you didn't bring a drink in that you gave away, you were fired immediately. And to me, that it breaks that chain of my staff's going to steal from me, so I won't let them have any comps. So because they're going to steal, they're going to, like giving the people who work for you some faith and trust. I think is one example, and I'm not saying that all places should be doing this, but it was meaningful to me and to the people who I worked with, and we never really had problems with theft. That's a really small example of how you show your employees that you trust them and that you give them some autonomy. And there are examples of that with like how you let your staff react to customer complaints or when they're disappointed with something, when you give them some autonomy to actually act on things that happen within the restaurant. Those are actions, real things that are transparent, that let the staff know that you actually care about them as human beings and you trust them. I don't know how that went with you guys.
I think that's a really amazing point, and
I'm stealing that.
Yeah.
Going.
Yeah, I mean, just what you said, like if you have the trust, you're not going to try to be deceptive. Whereas if you don't,
you're going to do it anyway. And there's
right. Yeah. So like, even if the owner doesn't think it's the right decision, you spending the time with these people know what's the right decision. So either you're going to do it honestly or try to hide it because all you're trying to do is ensure that this is like the best experience for another person. So
yeah.
Okay, so how can we become better listeners while making ourselves heard at the same time? I know when we sent these questions to you, I loved your response of just the easy stuff.
Well, being compassionate doesn't mean being soft or letting people get over on you. I think being a better listener. I don't know how to answer that, to be honest with you. I really don't.
Actually, sorry, I think I might have an answer.
Please.
I think that being a better listener empowers you to be heard, because you aren't just waiting for your time to speak. You are actually taking in what other people are saying and applying it to what you think and your reasoning, and giving people a real answer that's not just, I mean, we've all been part of those conversations where you're like, you were just waiting for me to stop talking. And I think especially in conversations with employers or authority figures, or even, you know, parents, where you're like, you're not hearing me. So it becomes confrontational, and you don't want to have that conversation any further, which I think is why a lot of people stop speaking and stop trying to be heard. So yeah, I think that the best way that I can say it is applying compassion to listening to other people, and then speaking from an honest and true place would be the best way.
That's awesome. I think you nailed it. Most of the time, people just want to be heard. So that just goes such a long way. I mean, I really think that you answered your own question and very, very well.
Well, and then kind of wrapping these up, I want to make sure that we discuss the difference between compassion and empathy, because I think I didn't know that there was a difference until I spoke with you.
That's really important, I think. So a lot of times the reason people don't they shut down is the okay. So empathy is when you notice someone else is hurting and you feel that with them. So like a mother with their child, when the child falls down and you feel that pain, like you literally feel that pain in your brain. That's like there's a spot in your brain that lights up when you see someone suffer and you suffer as well. And that's empathy, is that feeling that you get. Compassion takes it one step further. Compassion is noticing when someone else is suffering and wanting to do something about it. And the action doesn't actually have to, it could be discreet, it doesn't have to be something where you actually go and do something. It can be just sending them wishes. Like, for example, for me, I can't give money every single time I see someone on the street and they want and need money, and I feel bad and I want to do something. And that I wish you happiness was born of, that card was kind of born of that idea that when I see someone who's suffering and I can't do something about it, in my head I say, I wish you freedom from suffering. I wish you happiness. Compassion is, and that would be an example of compassion. But when you practice compassion, when you're actively in doing something compassionate, it lights up the reward center in your brain. So it's very different than just empathy, where you see that they're hurting and you hurt too. What happens when you're in compassionate mode is the reward center lights up, and then everybody wins. Like, you feel good. You've tried to do what you can, even when it's just sending that well wish, because you can't actually do something. Lost my train of thought, but the positive side of compassion is that you are rewarded for that desire to help. Whereas with empathy is actually the beginning stage. That's the first step, that you feel empathy, and then it goes on into compassion, ideally. And that's why, I think that's why a program like this is so important, is because healthcare workers, hospitality workers are constantly wanting wanting to help, and you burn out. You burn out if you can't take it into the mode of how can I help, where you feel a reward, where you see the reward in doing it.
That was actually my next question, is how do you practice without burnout?
Well, I mean, that's practice, that speaks to why that the program that I'm in starts with, practicing compassion towards someone who's really easy, the puppy, the niece, because it builds. You can build the practice, and you can get to a place where you're actually able to show compassion towards someone who you find very challenging, or the difficult customer. I mean, you don't start with Trump to get into politics and not get into politics. You're not going to start there, because you're not going to be able to actually get that feeling, and most people don't want to, but when you start with the easy target and kind of develop the muscle, because compassion exists inherently in us. It's something that we're born with, and then it's something over time that we turn off due to societal pressures, and why would you do that, and being hurt, and having life's experiences, and not being encouraged to be compassionate. But it's something that you can develop, by not putting yourself, not making it too difficult for yourself, and not being too hard on yourself. You're not going to automatically just be like, oh, I want to be compassionate, and then have a compassionate response every time something happens. It's not realistic.
I have my final questions, unless Christina or Matt have any other questions.
No, I'm just over here getting my mind blown. So
yeah, for real.
So we usually end on asking our guest what the future of hospitality looks like to you.
Well,
and this is, sky's the limit. We never put boundaries on this.
I mean, it has evolved, and I looked at the question, and I feel really, I feel like it's an overwhelming question because of where we are right now. I'm already really impressed with how sophisticated things have gotten in the last 10 years. And how many organizations have been developed in the last 10 years by people such as yourselves. I mean, when you I remember when I met my husband, I'd never really had like a real cocktail, and it was like, I'd had like cosmopolitans in the 90s, and then I met him in like 2006, and I was like, well, he's a bartender, and I remember I went and had a drink, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Holy shit, this is a thing. And I had always been like, oh, I was a server, there are bartenders, we don't do this for our whole lives, it's restaurants are restaurants, whatever. And that changed my view about what bartending was and what it is. And I had never had a problem with being a server or working in the restaurant. And whenever people would say, well, what are you going to do next? I was always like, I like this. This is good. I think the biggest difference and change that I see, and that will continue to grow, is that this is a lifestyle choice. It can be a career, and the stigma has been diminishing more and more. So I guess what I'd like to see, or what I do see happening more, is with organizations like yours and with people like you and so many more of us in general who want to support the industry, I can see it becoming really a more stable environment. And I can't, in my mind, I can't really get much greater than that. I mean.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful. And then my last question is, what does the future look like for you, and how will you continue practicing and spreading happiness?
Well, I'm in the short term, I think I'm hopeful that I can start reaching out to brands, and maybe hopefully starting to do some of this compassionate training through the support of brands, so I can do it on scholarship level. Will you give me a grant of this much money so I can get all of these people involved on a scholarship level to come and take these classes? I am hopefully going to start building my website this year. Basically a happiness toolbox, all of the resources that I've used and use to try and get happier. Books that I've read, podcasts, articles, movies, TV shows, everything that I employ to try and prop up my happiness. My happiness level, my baseline is really low. So, and happiness is something that you have to work on, So my future is to try and figure out how to continue to develop that and share that with whoever is interested in receiving. It's a good question. I had a major breakdown last year after taking a course in purpose, reading books on purpose, and not being able to figure out what my purpose was. It's hard. I mean, if you decide you want to know what your purpose is in life, and it's a big question, and for me, my purpose is to try and, spread happiness or help people be happier. I just not entirely sure how that's going to play out in the end. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, we can't wait to observe and see it happen. I'm very excited to keep tabs on you in a non-creepy way.
I'm okay with the creepy way. Okay. I really love what you guys are doing, and I'm so thankful that you asked me to join you. I feel like there are some areas that I wish I had answered a little bit differently, but it's a work in progress, and I was so excited to talk about this stuff. I'm always excited to talk about this stuff, and however I can help you guys and get the word out, and I want to do that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, this has been amazing. I think every time I talk about how amazing our guests are, but it's never a lie. So we will tag you, and also I think that we'll attach some of those books and the programs that you mentioned if anybody is curious about learning more or even getting involved. And if any of our viewers have any questions, we will redirect those to you, and then answer those as well. So awesome. Thank you.
Guys, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
For sure. As always, please hustle responsibly.